Our guest this morning, Mr. Anthony Jowid, comes to us from Santa Monica, California, where he is Chief Operating Officer and a Principal of Allied Argenta, a boutique real estate development company focused on affordable multifamily apartments throughout the western United States. Prior to joining Allied Argenta, he was the Chief Sales Officer for the Rabin Group, a $200 million group of companies focused on construction services and fuel distribution. He was charged with designing, implementing, and managing all sales and marketing efforts for the group's 15 different companies. Prior to Rabin, he was a regional vice president and equity partner with CertaPro Painters, North America's largest painting company. During his 9 years at CertaPro, he was a member of the executive team, which grew annual revenue from $60 million to $200 million in just 4 years. Mr. Jowid also co-founded and was vice president of operations for Marathon Development Group, a real estate development company focused on developing residential communities. Currently, Mr. Jowid is a mentor for at-risk inner-city youth for Los Angeles Team Mentoring. Anthony was a mentor for 9 years to at-risk inner-city youth and served on the board for Denver Urban Scholars. He was selected as the 2009 Male Mentor of the Year and 2011 Impact Person of the Year. He holds an MBA with a concentration in international business and a BBA in marketing from the University of Notre Dame Mendoza College of Business. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome back to campus Mr. Anthony Jowid.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? So one thing that Professor O'Rourke did not mention is I spent 8 years here at Notre Dame. 3 of which was one of the directors of the MBA program from 93 to 96. A friend over there who helped me build the program with a few others. So it's great to be back. Haven't been back in quite some time. Before I get started on the presentation, I just wanted to reflect on a few stories, a few experiences that I had here at Notre Dame to kind of set the stage for the presentation. First, 19 years ago, I had Professor O'Rourke as a professor. And I don't know if you remember this, and I don't know if you still teach this, but he used to teach how to properly set up memos, formatting and content of memos. Do you still do that? Still do it. So I thank you for giving me the format and the advice on content to resign from the university and get a full tuition scholarship. So I don't know if you remember that, but you helped me resign and you got me a free education, so thank you. Also, the communications department is named after a gentleman named Eugene Fanning, who I had great fortune of being in his class 23 years ago. So do I still have black hair, or is there? Anyway, he was an amazing man, gave a tremendous amount to the university. I don't know if you know his story, but he basically built up a great car dealership throughout Chicago and was part owner of the Chicago Bulls and White Sox. And after that, he would drive in his Lexus on Tuesdays and Thursdays from Chicago to Notre Dame and teach us. An amazing man with amazing practical, pragmatic advice. And I know it sounds goofy, but one of the things that I remember of all the things that he taught me was he didn't care about don't let him see you sweat. He cared about don't let him see your legs. So I actually wear, per his recommendation, socks that go up to my calves. So almost every day when I put socks on, either when I'm at work or on jeans, I actually think of Eugene Fanning. So great people at the university. I appreciate all that you guys did for us. One last bit of information that I guess I want to relay to you. 20 years ago, about 20 years ago, I was up here on this stage, the last time I was on this stage, introducing and welcoming the first MBA class to ever sit in these seats. So it's kind of weird to be back on stage, 20 years later with several business students in the audience. Also that day, Father Hesburgh was here presenting and welcoming the MBA students and telling his story. And although I don't have, and never will have, the kind of story that Father Hesburgh has, or did have, I did want to provide you a little insight into my Notre Dame story as a lead-in to the presentation today. So I don't know where Mike Connaughton is. There he is. By the way, he's the reason I'm here. He asked me to come out here, so thanks. He knows a bit of my story. The first semester I arrived here. By the way, who here is a legacy? Had a parent that graduated? Okay, so my father graduated in 1957, and as probably most of you who have a parent who graduated, ever since I can remember, it was a dream of mine to come to the university. So I finally made it here. My first semester, around Thanksgiving, my father passed away. And then my mom and I had what are we going to do from a standpoint of financial, being able to afford to stay at Notre Dame. And so, fortunately, the university put together a package for me to allow me to stay here from a financial perspective. Part of that package was work-study program. How many are in the work-study program? Well, not many. Okay, well, back then, if you went into work-study, about 90% of the people in work-study went to the dining hall and worked in the dining hall. So the day I returned to campus after Christmas break, I walked into the work-study program expecting to go work at the dining hall. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday, and I walked in, and they literally just got off the phone with the MBA program and said they need a male sophomore business student in the MBA program. So I took that slip, I walked down to the MBA program, and for the next 3.5 years, I worked for the MBA program and developed great relationships, developed great knowledge, skill, and experience on the back shop of the university and in the program. And upon graduation, they created the assistant director position specifically for me so that I can remain at the university. So I was the first assistant director of the MBA program. Many years ago, I was actually the youngest one in the US, which I'm not sure what that means, but so from that experience, in one of the years I was one of the directors, I admitted Chuck O'Neill, who is now 20 years later a partner of mine at Affordable Housing. And Chuck got his MBA at Notre Dame. Later on in his career, his wife got her M&A. Who knows the M&A program? I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Masters of basically nonprofit. And then a colleague of mine, got her M&A at Notre Dame. So now there are 4 of us in our company that are Notre Dame grads. And the reason I start off this way is the amount of investment that we've made in ourselves, the amount of investment that we've made in others, the amount of investment that the university has made in us has allowed us to start this company and start making investments in others and communities throughout the U.S. So I wanted to give a little bit of background on who I am and kind of my story to lead into this affordable housing world. So let me ask you this. Who out here, when you think of affordable housing, think of the public, like the projects and public housing? Okay. How many of you think that they're dilapidated, that they are very low income, that they're crime-ridden? Okay, well, hopefully today I'll change that opinion a bit, because that is not what affordable housing is today. So although I am an entrepreneur, I do have a corporate background, and so my presentation today will have a bit of a corporate feel to it in terms of how it's structured. So here's what I hope to do today. My purpose today is to give you guys an understanding of the affordable housing industry. I also want to give you an understanding of the importance of affordable housing and what it does and what it can do for the collective community. And lastly, per Professor O'Rourke's recommendation, give you some insight into the risk and rewards of not only the industry, but of being an entrepreneur. How many of you here are interested in owning your own business or being an entrepreneur at some point? Okay. My objective today, simple or audacious, depending how you look at it. My internal objective is not to cough because I'm fighting a bit of sinusitis and bronchitis, so internally I hope that doesn't happen. But for you, I hope that you walk out of here today with one or two takeaways that make you more effective in investing in yourselves and in others. So with that, here's what we'll do today. We went through the purpose, objectives. We're going to go through the agenda. I'd like to give you an overview of who we are and what we do at Allied. An introduction to affordable housing. It's a very complex world. I'm going to give you a very high-level view of what it is, get into some detail to provide you some insight into what it is, the importance of affordable housing, specifically in the US, what I believe is the impact of our work in affordable housing, both from Allied's perspective in what we do, as well as the general landscape of affordable housing. Give you some insight into the future of affordable housing, things that are on the horizon. I know this is the 10 years hence, so projecting out to give you some insight into what I see and what the industry sees over the next several years. As I mentioned, providing you some risk and reward insight from the affordable housing side as well as the entrepreneurship side, and then we'll wrap it up. And then hopefully we'll have a few minutes for Q&A at the end. Okay, who are we? Overall, Allied Affordable Housing, we acquire, i.e. purchase, we rehab or construct, and we asset manage multifamily apartments throughout the western part of the US. We do have properties in Indiana, which is where we got our start, but we focus on 6 states on the West Coast: California, Oregon, Arizona, Utah, and Nevada. And basically these 4 companies, one is the parent company, one company is the acquisition side, one company is the construction side, and one company is the asset management and property management side. There are only 13 of us in this company, so we wear many hats. As I mentioned, Yvonne Delgadillo, who is the M&A, she focuses on the community development, going out and getting soft funds, and working with municipalities, state, city, and counties to ensure that we are doing what we need to do for the community. We are mission-driven. Does anyone know what triple bottom line means? Okay, I see a few head shaking. Who doesn't know what that means? Okay, so I'll relate it in a few ways. You have the social side, you have the environmental side, and you have the financial side. You can think of it as people, planet, profit, or the 3 pillars of sustainability. So although we are mission-driven, we also are a for-profit company, so we are interested in making money. So I'll ask, who out here is interested in doing good in the world? Okay, and who is interested in making money? Okay, so that's what we do, or we try to do. Give you a bit of insight. Although we are a fairly new company, many of us come from extensive backgrounds, our knowledge, our skill, our experience in the affordable housing world in different industries. And so just very quickly, so that you understand that we do have a strong background in what we do, collectively, the 13 of us have completed over $1 billion in transactions, completed transactions in over 12 different states, financed over $200 million in multifamily projects, managed over 10,000 units in 6 different states, secured tax-exempt bond financing on over 50 projects, and underwritten over 150 tax credit properties, resulting in over $800 million in equity investment. So we know what we're doing. We are very small, but we are a fairly intelligent group who has several years of experience in doing this. So, enough of Allied. What is the affordable housing and how does it work? Generally speaking, affordable housing has moved away from the public housing authorities and the public housing that many of you raised your hand that you may have in your minds, the projects that still exist. And really, since 1986, when this was first implemented, this is how affordable housing is built and managed and created from that point forward. And it's called the low-income housing tax credits. Anyone heard of LIHTC before? I know you probably have. His son works in the industry. So I'll refer to it as LIHTC moving forward, but it's low-income housing tax credits. And it's basically the equity that is used to fund affordable housing. This program is considered one of, if not the most successful government program in recent years. It is extraordinarily bipartisan. The Republicans and the Democrats and everyone in between, most of them buy into this program and support this program. So it has tremendous support. It's considered the most effective, one of the most effective government programs. And one of the reasons, as you may realize, is the government, in effect, is taken out of the equation. So I'll show you a slide in a moment, but before you had the government taking the taxpayer dollars and using those taxpayer dollars to build and to manage affordable housing. It didn't work so well. And so what they've done is they've basically realized that the private sectors are better at this than they are, and so they have removed themselves from the acquisition, the construction, and the management of affordable housing and left it to the private sector, the public sector in certain ways, and the nonprofit organization. So it is a great combination of allowing the public sector, the private sector, and the nonprofit sector to work together to ensure that there's great affordable housing in the U.S. One last note, Bill Clinton in 1993 made this a permanent program. So in 86, it came out as a demonstration, is what the government calls things that they want to experiment with. And if it works, they make it permanent. If it doesn't, it goes away. So, as you heard earlier, I was actually in sales and marketing. So this is my marketing. I created this. I try to make it very, very simple. At a very high level, you have the federal government, you have corporations, and you have affordable housing. And basically, what happens is these tax credits are awarded to states by the government, and then these tax credits are used as the equity. So basically, what the government has allowed investors or corporations to do is lower their tax liability by investing in these companies. And so their tax bills are lower. The government spends no money on the affordable housing, and there's a partnership between the affordable housing and these investors. So the tax credits and equity get transferred between corporation, in effect, investor, and those that are developing the affordable housing. Now I'm going to get a little more complex with this next slide, but listen more than look. But this gives you a more robust understanding of what takes place with affordable housing. The tax credits go from the government to the investors, and you can see from an investor to the developer in affordable housing, a partnership is created. And basically, the money and the equity go to affordable housing. The tax credits go back to the investor. They lower the tax liability. And down here, the low-income household, the renters, there are three things that are required by HUD to ensure that affordable housing and these tax credits get exchanged. One, that you ensure that the people who are living in affordable housing only make a certain amount of money, i.e. either 30% or 50% of what we call AMI, which is the average median income. So you got to make it available to a certain group of people. You have to make it affordable for those people, so the rents can only be so much. And then it has to be suitable for occupancy, i.e. it has to be a quality place to live. You see that little diagram over there, debt and equity. Depending on the type of structure that exists, you could have a tremendous amount of debt or a tremendous amount of equity that's flowing into the deal. So I'll quickly go over what these parties are. So the slide doesn't necessarily show everything, but these are the parties that are involved in affordable housing. You have the municipalities. They are responsible for creating what we call a QAP, which is a qualified application process. They determine per state what are the requirements that the developer and owners have to agree to in order to either construct or acquire and rehab a property. So energy efficiency, services that are being offered at the facility. So they determine what exists on property. They issue the credits. They can issue private activity bonds. Who knows what a private activity bond is? Real quick. Okay, a private activity bond basically is a municipality providing bonds or financing to the private sector to build a project for the public good. That's, in a nutshell, that is what it is. And lastly, they can provide soft debt. So soft debt is, in effect, forgivable grants or forgivable loans. So basically, they will provide a project a certain amount of money, either with little or no interest, and that loan is not paid back, either interest or principal, until the project sells 15 years later. So basically, it's quote-unquote free money, at least for the life of the project, in order for them to ensure that there's good, affordable housing in their communities. The other piece, the developer owner, i.e. us, we are the ones really who take almost all of the risk. We are the ones who find the deals. We're the ones who have to go through the QAPs and make sure we meet all the requirements. We bring all of the parties together that you see up here, the lenders, the tax credit investors, the community development people, the soft funds. We actually do the construction, all the subcontractors, all the contractors. We build the project, and then we asset manage the project and are responsible to ensure that That place is a good place. That place is sustainable. And we are the ones responsible for doing the audits and ensuring that all of those criteria that I mentioned earlier about renters and income limits are met. So there's a tremendous amount of risk and responsibility from our standpoint in relation to affordable housing. The tax credit investor, these are the investors that go out and buy the tax credits and provide the equity. Generally speaking, these are very large entities, banks, but also there are other organizations that realize the tax benefits to this environment. So there are companies like Microsoft who are tax credit investors, and even Shaquille O'Neal is a tax credit investor, strangely enough. So people and organizations are realizing the benefit of investing in their communities and also getting that tax benefit. The lender. So there are two types of lenders really in our world. There's HUD, and then there's traditional debt or traditional lenders that we can utilize, banks. And there's a lot of good and bad by using both. We'll get into that a little bit later, but there are two really primary debt providers in our world. There is a syndicator, which actually Bill's son works for, one of the largest, called Enterprise. But a syndicator is basically a connector. They put tax credit investors and developers together. They're going out and brokering the deals to help bring those two parties together. Sometimes we use them, sometimes we don't, but they are very effective in the industry. Nonprofit organizations. These are the organizations that we work with that provide resident services as well as tax exemption. These deals are very difficult to make pencil, the financial feasibility of them. And one of the ways they work is when we're able to get tax exemption on these properties. So basically, over the life of the property, if we have a nonprofit partner who is active in our deals, they allow us to basically receive either between 50% and 100% tax exemption. So when we have these deals, we have to hold on to these properties for 15 years. That's the minimum amount of time that the government requires us to hold on to these deals. And so when you think about the financial feasibility of a project and you have 15 years worth of tax exemption, let's say there's $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 of taxes each year, that could be up to $1.5 million or more that we don't have to pay, which reduces our cost in the initial funding of the deal. So they play an important part of providing residential services to the community, but also providing us tax exemption. And finally, and most importantly, the residents. Obviously the rental income, but they are the tenants, they are why we are doing this. So that gives you hopefully a good understanding of the parties that are involved in affordable housing. So here are the four primary ways of financing the project. There's equity, and there's a few different forms of equity. One is the tax credits, which is the primary form of equity. The other forms of equity, you can have private investment that is coming in. You can also have equity that you as the owner or developer are putting in. So we have put our own money into it. We have received funds from other investors. In fact, we have two investors who are both large, I would say, benefactors or investors of Notre Dame. Mr. Leitig, he is on the board of the College of Business here, and Larry Costin, who is in Chicago. He's a Subway alum, but also is a tremendous contributor to the university. They have become partners of ours as investors. So there are different forms of equity that we can bring in to the project. The conventional debt and bonds, which I mentioned, deferred developer fees, and partner loans. So what is a deferred developer fee? Basically, as I mentioned before, we take on a tremendous amount of risk as owners and as developers. All the other entities that I mentioned earlier have a tremendous interest in us surviving and us succeeding and staying involved in the project so that we can ensure that those projects last the 15 years. So, as I mentioned, we're for profit. And therefore, there is a certain amount of money that we get by doing these deals. So let's say, make it easy on my brain, you have a $10 million purchase price on a project. Generally speaking, our projects are $10 million or greater. The developer fee that comes from that is typically 20 to 25%. So we're receiving $2.5 million in developer fees. Now that may seem like a lot of money, but generally speaking, again, these are very difficult to pencil. So we typically take a minimum of $500,000, or in our world, actually a maximum of $500,000 up front when we acquire the deal, and the other $2 million are deferred over anywhere from 7 years to the life of the project in order for that deal to work. So although we make 2.5, we're actually putting that money back into the deal in effect to make it work, and that money is spread out over time. But that money is important because we're out there finding deals, we're out there funding deals, and it's important that we are sustainable and profitable for the long term. And lastly, I mentioned the soft debt and the grants. So those are the 4 ways that these projects are funded. Big picture timeline. So I mentioned the QAP. So first and foremost, that QAP is developed every year. So every year, the requirements per state change. So we have to go in, do the research, understand all the requirements, and meet those requirements in order to put a deal together and actually receive those tax credits. There are 2 forms of tax credits that we receive, or we could receive, which is 4% and 9%. I'll get into that here momentarily. Once we receive the tax credits and the property is acquired, construction commences. Once construction finishes and it's completed, we lease up, and those operations continue for 15 years. So big picture timeline, you've got the requirements that are met, you've got the funding, you've got the construction, and then you've got the operations. So, in effect, there are 2 types of tax credit equity. There is the 4% and the 9%. And at a very high level, 9% basically is for new construction, and it's competitive. So every year, the states are given a minimum from the federal government, about $2.6 million in tax credits. And then these tax credits are awarded for the new construction 9% deals. These are very competitive. You have to apply for them, and very few of them get awarded every year. But there are no bonds. Think of it this way, about 70 to 90% of the 9% deals are equity, whereas in the 4%, there's bonds. They're non-competitive. There is no cap on the number of deals that can be done with 4%. They're much more difficult to do, but they're not competitive. They have private activity bonds, but the equity that you get from the 4% is basically about 30 or 40% of the funding. Makes it way more difficult to get this deal to pencil because now you have to find all the additional funds that I mentioned before to make those 4% work. We focus primarily on 4%. So all the deals that we have done have been 4%. So we work with bonds, we work with the debt, and we work with the equity. So just remember, 4%, 9% is new construction, a lot more equity. The 4% are acquisition rehab with a lot more debt. Why does this program work? 4 big reasons why. The state agencies have a very rigorous process to ensure that the tax credits that are being used are only the maximum amount of tax credits that are needed to fund the deal. I showed you the four, or I would say 6 different parties that are involved in these deals. So picture this. How many of you are finance majors? Okay, so if you understand underwriting, basically doing the financial feasibility of the deal to make sure it works. So picture this. In every deal we do, the HUD underwrites it to see if it's financially feasible, and they all do this individually. The tax credit investor underwrites it to make sure it's financially feasible. The lender underwrites it to make sure it's financially feasible. The municipality, city, state, or county, whoever's funding the soft debt and the bonds, underwrites it to ensure that it's financially feasible. And we're underwriting it to ensure that it's financially feasible. So you have at least 4, if not 6 or 7 different entities that are underwriting this thing to ensure that this deal will work and will ensure that for 15 years it's sustainable. And I can tell you, if it passes 6 different sets of very highly qualified entities, the chances of this thing failing are very minimal. So that rigorous process of ensuring that the minimum amount of tax credits are used, but also the process of underwriting ensures that these things will work. They must remain affordable for at least 30 years. So I mentioned that we have to hold on to it for 15 years. As owners and developers, we are required to manage that property for 15 years. But there are also what they call land use regulation agreements, regulatory agreements that at minimum require these properties to remain affordable for at least 30 years, some 50 or 60 years. What the government doesn't want to do is doesn't want to allow a developer to go in to have these properties and then 15 years later hit the high road and they're no longer affordable. So they want to protect the affordability of these properties and ensure that their communities have affordable, the tenants have access to affordability for extended periods of time. Third, the private sector has a stake in making these units work. Again, all these different parties involved have a stake in this, whether they're nonprofit or for-profit. There is money involved. There are services involved. So it's important to the private sector that this LIHTC program works. And finally, due to the housing credit's public and private partnership structure, it ensures that there are private sector disciplines being used to make sure that this works. So from a developer owner perspective, every year we have to ensure that our tenants are qualified, that the quality of the property is in good order. We get audited every year to ensure that all the tax credits that we're using and all the money that we're spending to the dollar is accounted for. So there are standard business practices that are absolutely utilized in this world to ensure that it remains sustainable. So I wanted to give you some insight into why this program works, why it has continued to work, and why we believe that over the course of the next several years, that the affordability for these residents will continue. So I don't know how well you can see that up there, but I wanted to give you insight into the issue that is facing the United States right now in terms of affordability. Basically, if you can see the orange, that orange across the map, so the blue is good, and not a lot of blue, the orange is bad. And basically what the orange indicates is the need for affordable housing in the US, the crisis that exists. Again, I don't know if you can read that, but basically what it says is there is one unit, one affordable and available unit for every 100 households of extremely low income. So again, one unit is available for every 100 households that need that unit. There's about 11.5 million households that need this, and there's about 100,000+ available units. That's a pretty huge gap in relation to what the need is and what the availability is. Again, hopefully you can see this, but just to give you a bit more context in relation to these tenants that live in these units. Now you may think, and again I'll ask for hands, how many of you think that those who live in low-income affordable housing don't work? Okay. Most of these tenants do work. I can tell you the majority of our properties, the majority of our tenants work. So they are earning income. They are paying for their apartments, their housing units. But again, they're paying, because they make a small amount of money, they're paying a lower amount for their rent. So understand, most of these low and extremely low income tenants are actually working. But here's an understanding: in an average 2-bedroom apartment, a person makes $18.79 per hour, which allows them to work 40 hours a week. That would allow them to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. The average renter earns $14.32 per hour, which requires them, if they want to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, requires them to work 52 hours a week. Minimum wage is $7.25, which, if they wanted to afford a 2-bedroom apartment, they would be required to work 104 hours. Of course, that's not really feasible, but that gives you, hopefully, those two slides gives you an understanding of the crisis and the need for affordable housing, and it gives you an understanding of the people who need the housing and the kind of money that they make and what they can afford. So, what has the LIHTC program done since, it started in '86, once it became permanent in '93, that's really when things picked up. But since that time, the LIHTC program has built 2.5 million rental units across the US. On an annual basis, since its inception, there's about 100 to 120,000 new units that are coming online every year. Again, we talked earlier about public housing, the PHA's Public Housing Authority, and the LIHTC program. So currently, almost all affordable housing in the US is now being developed by the LIHTC program. So this is the primary source of affordable housing in the US. The importance of this. I mentioned the QAP, which is that application process which lays out all the requirements that you must meet to get the tax credits. They are very high on energy efficiency. So windows, doors, HVACs, roofs, water systems, the plumbing, all the things that allow there to be a greater energy efficiency and sustainability. Not only is it good for the environment, it's good for the tenants that live in the apartments. Because by providing that, they lower their utility bills, they have a warmer or colder environment depending on where they live with the HVAC systems. They have warm and hot water, cold and hot water when they need it. So the energy efficiency provides a huge benefit to the community, to society, and to the people who actually live there. Safety, tremendous amount of crime reduction and prevention that takes place when either a community is built or a community is rehabbed, like in our case. And I'm going to go through in a moment our impact specifically on the properties that we've done. Health, you may not think or realize the benefits, but there's been a tremendous amount of studies that have been done in relation to the health benefits of these affordable housing properties, specifically physical, emotional, and mental. So when you think about how people feel when they live in a good quality place versus living in a dilapidated environment. From a standpoint of, and let me tell you, some of the places that we've taken over, where there's mold, there are roaches, tremendous amount of, disgusting living conditions, to be able to go in there and recreate an environment so that these people can live in a healthy place makes a huge difference, not only physically, but emotionally and mentally, because they feel good about themselves. They feel good that their children are in a better place. So it makes a tremendous amount of difference from a health perspective. Education. Generally speaking, when these properties are built or they are rehabbed, they're in areas that are close to elementary schools, to middle schools, and to high schools. So the access to education, i.e. being able to walk or ride your bike instead of having to travel long distances. A lot of these affordable housing properties are also in good communities, and therefore the children who are in these communities are having access to better education than in the inner cities. And as you can imagine, if you're in a better school and you're feeling good about yourself and you have better teachers, the performance of those children are higher, and there are studies that show the improvements that children are having for those who live in the affordable housing units. Transportation. Generally speaking, people who live in affordable housing have to drive fairly long distances to get where they work. I can tell you, I live in Santa Monica. I don't know if you know about Santa Monica, but it's a really expensive place to live. I moved there about a year ago, and it's killing me. But it literally is one of the most expensive cities in the US. It's considered one of, if not the most expensive city in the LA area, or the Santa Monica area. My wife works about a mile from our office, and almost everyone who works in her office, they drive about an hour to an hour and a half to get to work. And so when we have these affordable units that are in communities that have work opportunities, they actually now can get to work quicker, which gives them a tremendous amount more time with their family, gives them a tremendous amount more time at the home. It reduces their cost of transportation in terms of gas, in terms of car, etc. And so that makes a big difference. I also put, again, talking about the triple bottom line, the carbon emissions that are reduced, and there are studies with this as well. If you're driving an hour and a half to work every day, which is i.e. 3 hours a day, by reducing that, you're reducing the carbon emissions that are happening in the environment. And then lastly, additional income. Because they're lowering their utility costs, because they're lowering their health costs, because they have more time to spend at home, they're able to get better health care. They're able to provide better food to their children and to their families, and obviously better education. So there are a tremendous amount of benefits to the affordable housing world, and this LIHTC program allows these things to take place in the U.S. So, to give you a bit of insight into our world and our impact, these are 5 properties that we have acquired and rehabbed in the last 2 or 3 years. Actually, the 5th one, the acquisition is starting today, and it will be finalized on Wednesday. So Summerhill is our next project. But the first 4, the 2 in Indiana, and I'll talk about Meadowlark. We actually changed the name. It used to be called Hart's Landing. And if you talk to the residents there, they used to nickname it Hart's Dying because of the amount of crime and death and gangs and drugs that took place on the property. Both these Indianapolis properties are in East Indiana. They are not great areas. We took over these properties and rehabbed them. So a couple things. One, when we first got on property, we brought the police department out and asked their advice on what we should do as we take over this project and as we rehab this project. And the first thing they said is, you've got to reduce the landscaping and the shrubs and the bushes to give more visibility to the property because it's hidden and a lot of things can happen, behind the wall, so to speak. We changed the landscaping. We reduced the shrubberies and found 5 handguns in the bushes in the front of the property. We now have cameras all throughout the property. We have on-site patrol, unarmed security that is on-site at all times. We actually have a substation for the Indianapolis Police Department. And from a crime perspective, crimes that were in the hundreds of crimes a year, anywhere from shootings, death, drugs, you name it. It was crazy. I'm actually the one who does the crime mapping when we look at new properties. When you see the kind of crime that was taking place, the number of crimes that were taking place on that property. And now you're talking less than 100 a year. Now that may seem like a lot, but when there are several hundred crimes happening a year and you can reduce that by 4 or 5-fold, that's a tremendous impact on a community. That property, and actually all of our properties, new roofs, new paving, new windows, new doors, all new interiors, all new hardwood floors, all new appliances, all new countertops, all new cabinets. So the interiors are completely renovated, again, providing those people who live there a great place to live. I don't know, I'm sure you guys know Lafayette Square. Who knows Lafayette Square? It's a housing development here. I was the first tenant to live in number 5. I can tell you, the first year it was built, it was horrible. I don't know what it's like now, but that place was built horribly then. And these places that we build and we rehab, again, I was here 20 plus years ago. At least the south side dorms were not so nice. I don't know about what the new dorms look like, but I can tell you when I lived here, the places that we're acquiring and rehabbing are nicer than a lot of dorms that existed at Notre Dame back then. So the HVAC systems, as I mentioned, the plumbing, the energy efficiency that we create in these places do a tremendous amount of good for these people and for the community. So I can tell you from personal experience the impact that it's having. You go out to these communities, you spend time with these people, and they are so excited and so happy to be there. People are coming up who you don't know and hugging you and so happy to talk to you about it. There are service coordinators that are on site that are providing opportunities for tax. So when you have your taxes in April, they're giving these low-income people understandings of how to do their taxes, how to financially plan, diet and exercise, after-school programs, athletic programs. So these service coordinators, these nonprofit entities that we partner with, are providing things outside of the units as well to ensure that there are healthy, happy environments, for these people. So, it's a great industry to help people. It's also very cool to be a part of it, to see the impact that you're having on these lives on a daily basis. Even, this project, Summerhill in Vegas, we haven't even started on the project, but we're there almost every week, doing a whole bunch of, construction preparation. The people who live there know we're coming in. They know what we're going to do. And even those people are coming up to us and talking to us, and, and the excitement and the interest, it's amazing. It's an awesome feeling to know that you're having that kind of impact on people's lives. So, what are the economic benefits of this program and of affordable housing? I just want to show you this quick slide to give you a sense of what this does. So for every 100 low-income housing tax credit apartment that is created, $7.9 million in local income in the first year and $2.4 million annually. So again, now you have more people living in a community, they're contributing to the community, they're working in the community. We do probably $6 to $8 million of construction on each of these projects. The one Metal Arc, the one I mentioned before with the 5 handguns, we purchased that for $14 million, and we put $12 million of investment in construction in that property. So there's a significant amount of construction. So the amount of work that's going on, because they're all hired locally, all the people that are doing this work are local vendors in the community. 122 local jobs in the first year and 30 jobs annually. And finally, $827,000 in taxes in the first year and $441,000 on an annual basis. So there's truly an economic benefit to ensuring that there's affordable housing in these communities. It's not just to provide a great place, but it's also to build the community from an economic standpoint. So, to the point of 10 years hence, let's talk about the future of affordable housing. Nothing's going to happen this year in tax reform because there's an election, I think, coming up soon, and no one wants to touch it. But there are significant tax reforms that are going to happen in the coming years. If there's a legislator named Camp, if you know who he is, but he's put forth a pretty significant tax reform bill that has a lot of support. What you'll see with tax reform as it relates to affordable housing, a lot of the tax credits that are being provided right now in the US are going to go away. You'll see the tax credit for energy, solar, and wind. They are going to be reduced, if not removed. But the one tax credit that is going to remain, again, there's tremendous bipartisan support on this, is the LIHTC program. In fact, they're making the 4% and the 9% permanent. And what that means is kind of like Xerox. When you make a copy, everyone calls it a Xerox. The 4% and 9%, you actually don't get 4% or 9%. They just named it that, and it's actually like 3.2 right now and could be 8.6. But they're making the 4% and 9% set at 4% and actually 9%. So right now we do deals, we're actually only receiving about 3.2% from an equity perspective. So there's a lot of tax reforms that are happening, and the LIHTC program will become a permanent program from a standpoint of 4% and 9%. Housing reforms. The new HUD secretary is really pushing for a lot of housing reforms to protect the communities and the households that are in affordable housing units. One, for example, is violence against women. domestic violence. And so there's now a reform in place, legislation, that allows women who are victims of domestic violence to live in these affordable units and be protected from their husbands or boyfriends or whomever are harming them. I don't know if you know, but in the past, and even to a certain extent now, people who are victims of domestic violence, if it's known, they can be prevented, not necessarily, you can't necessarily tell them they're doing this, but people who are reviewing their applications can prevent them from living in those communities because they're afraid that the perpetrator will come into that community and cause more problems. So victims of domestic violence are actually being prevented from living in these affordable units. And so now there is legislation to ensure that that does not happen. And so there are housing reforms that are taking place moving forward to protect the people who are living in these communities, to ensure people can have access to these communities and can remain in those communities. A huge push right now across the United States from an affordable housing perspective is to ensure that veterans have an affordable place to live and can find affordable places to live. And in combination with that, there are a lot of veterans that are homeless. And you'll hear this term probably moving forward, the need to end chronic homelessness. There's a tremendous amount of people across North America that do not have a place to live. They're living on the streets, many of which are veterans. And so these QAPs that I mentioned before in the affordable housing units that are being developed or being rehabbed are now being required to ensure that these populations and these communities are housed in those areas. I will tell you, in Santa Monica, again, being one of the most expensive places in the US, every new housing community that is developed in Santa Monica is required to have a minimum of 10% affordability. And as we move forward, in the years, you're going to see communities across North America, the states and the cities and the counties, put these in their QAPs and require it so that people who are living in more expensive areas, who are living in major metropolitan areas, have the ability to live in the communities that they work in. Again, going back to the importance, reducing the transportation, ensuring access to jobs, ensuring access to education. So you're going to see a wave moving forward to ensure that veterans and the homeless have places to live, and that these housing communities have at least a certain percentage of affordability in them. Disabled. One of the reasons I joined Allied is because the passion that Chuck and Sukeshi, his wife, have on this industry and a passion that they have for the disabled. I know probably Jim and Bill know this, but Chuck and Sukeshi have a child who's now 19 years old who is developmentally disabled. And inherently, this population is low income. And once this population turns 22, generally speaking, the state and parents and families take care of this population, when they're young. But when they turn 22, basically, they now are, quote unquote, in the working world. And many of them can't work. And if they do work, they're working at Walmart or at a local hardware store or somewhere where they're making minimum wage or making a low income. And so there's a huge push in the industry for affordable housing for this population. I talk about Chuck and Sukeshi and their son. One of the things we're doing at Allied is through our knowledge, skill, and experience of the affordable housing world and LIHTC, we want to create a model that takes that LIHTC world and marries it up with the needs of the developmentally disabled. Because interestingly enough, there are very few housing opportunities for this population. So we've been working on this for a year, and in effect, we are going to develop our first housing property for the developmentally disabled. And we hope that this will be a model that we can then expand throughout Southern California, then throughout California, and then hopefully throughout the United States. So this is a vision, it's a passion, and it's a belief that we can do. We have a visioning session next week. It's kind of cool because there's about 50 or 60 people who will be part of that. Community leaders, municipalities, lenders, tax credit investors, architects, every stakeholder that represents a piece of the affordable housing, a piece of the developmentally disabled. We've tried to bring in those parties to have a visioning session on what this model could look like. And then in a month or two, we're going to have a charrette. I don't know if you know what a charrette is, but it's basically bringing those parties together once we've identified the location. And all of us together will actually literally design what that apartment complex will look like and ensure that it meets all the requirements of all the stakeholders for that population of people. So at a global level, this industry is focused on the disabled. At a local level or a personal level, we are developing a model to ensure that this population has quality places to live. Depletion of existing inventory. Although we're a profit-oriented company, there are other developers and owners out there that are more profit-oriented than we are. And there's actually a depletion of affordable housing in the US. I showed you that slide earlier with the orange. But when the 15 years of ownership expire, and there are these owners that want to get out of the property, these properties, even though they may have that regulatory agreement that requires the affordability to last another 15, 30 years, there are developers and owners that are coming in and taking these properties, knowing that they can hold on to them for a period of time, and then make them market rate properties. So they are taking over these properties, they are actually paying a higher price for them, which is hurting us since we can't buy them. They are doing very little rehab on them. So when you build, or more so when you acquire an affordable housing as an affordable housing developer, you are required to make a significant investment in that property. If you're not an affordable housing developer, you don't have to make that investment. You don't have to live by the QAPs. You don't have to live by the requirements that the bonds put on you or HUD puts on you. You can do whatever you want outside of the requirements that it has to be affordable. So you've heard the term lipstick on a pig. They can take over these properties. They can, do the minimal amount of maintenance and hold on to these things until they can make it market rate. So there is a depletion of existing inventory, and you see that happening more and more. And so, there are a lot of things happening to try to prevent that. One of which is legislation that says if you are an affordable housing developer and you remove yourself from the affordable housing arena, and you'll see this on the next slide. It's called the QC, the qualified contract process. It's basically an affordable developer who wants to get out of his 15-year contract. If you take yourself out of it, then you will no longer be able to be an affordable housing developer. Specifically, you'll no longer be able to either construct or rehab and own an affordable housing property in that community. And so from a legislation perspective moving forward, there is an effort to try to minimize the depletion of the existing inventory. Lastly, on the future, there's a thing called RAD. That does not mean cool. It means rental assistance demonstration. I mentioned to you before the LIHTC program was a demonstration in the beginning, an experiment, and then it became permanent. Public housing authorities, PHAs, those that literally own and manage the projects, those that many of you thought were the dilapidated units across the US, they have no money. They cannot rehab and maintain the existing properties. There is no money in state governments now, and city and county governments. So they have a real problem. And so what has happened in the last year is this program called RAD, which is basically allowing the PHAs to utilize the LIHTC program to rehab and ensure that their constituencies, the people living in the public housing, have a quality life and their units are up to par. The good thing is they get rehabbed. They have access to money, and people are living better. And this is a program that is now going to become permanent. The first year, they allowed 60,000 units across the US to participate in this LIHTC program. It did so well that they've now brought in another 180,000. The applications from PHAs across the US are way more than 180,000, but it is allowing 180, 200,000 plus units across the US to get rehabbed. The problem with the program, very quickly, is the PHAs will then no longer own the public housing. They defer or give up their ownership to the developers. And they will continue to manage these properties, but at the end of the day, if the owner, developer, and other parties involved don't like their management, they can actually be removed from the management as well. That's bad because you have PHAs who, these people love and believe in what they do. They're used to owning and managing and running, and these people have jobs. So if for whatever reason the other entities don't like what they're doing, they can be removed from their environment. But it is the only way that public housing can get renovated. There is no money. So it's a huge program. It will continue to make a difference in the future of affordable housing. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about that. How are we doing on time?
We're getting close.
Okay. So, very quickly, the risk factors involved in affordable housing. Interest rates make a big difference. Again, financial feasibility of affordable housing requires that we take on a loan at a certain interest rate. And these deals can take anywhere from 9 months to a year and a half to close. And so an interest rate, although they've been historically low right now, they're going to pop up as things change in the economy, and that can drastically change whether these deals work or not. Occupancy. We have to maintain the the qualified candidates or residents in the units. And if occupancy drops below a certain level, we don't get our tax credits. And so occupancy, if the economy goes bad and people move out and we can't bring in qualified candidates, we are in danger of losing our tax credits. I mentioned yield buyers. These are market rate buyers who come in and buy the properties and reduce the inventory, but also they increase the price to what we can't afford them, and there's less opportunity for us to purchase and manage these properties. I talked about the QC program. We talked a bit about the economic downturn. When there is an economic downturn and people have less profit and less taxes, they have less need for tax credits and reduce their tax liability. So if the economy takes a dive, the industry has issues. High transaction costs. Our deals, they have to be a minimum of $5 million. Below $5 million, the amount of transaction costs make it not financially feasible. So it's a tremendous amount of cost involved just to make the transaction. I mentioned the extended transaction cycles, the amount of money that in time and resources that it takes in a year and a half to make these deals work versus the time to close. So you're having to go hard. We're having to put a tremendous amount of money down as a deposit in order to hold on to the property. And then a year and a half goes by before this property is secured. And so we're having to survive, so to speak, until we acquire these properties, i.e. the need for that developer fee. And again, we have to work with HUD. HUD is a government organization. They have a lot of requirements, a lot of regulations. And so it's a difficult partnership we have with HUD in the timing it takes to get these deals done.
Tony?
Yep.
Can we move to questions?
Yes, we can move to questions.
Good. I'm sure there are at least a few questions. We're getting short on time, but I'd like to know what's on your minds.
Hi, I was just wondering how you guys decide what states that you're involved in, like why are you on the West Coast specifically?
Good question. So as I mentioned, we have 2 properties in Indiana. We actually have 4, 2 we own, 2 we asset manage. As simple as it sounds, a 3-hour time zone is an issue. Flying into Indiana or Indianapolis, you have to go, basically it's not a direct flight, so the timing it takes to get to the property and the needs of the property in terms of what's happening. We talk about crime, we talk about social services and things that are happening. We feel like as owners, our ability to be in the same time zone, our ability to get to our properties quickly, our ability to affect those properties in terms of services requires us to be in a location that is in close proximity. So that's the primary reason.
Had a couple questions. Can you combine TIF financing with the LIHTC program?
I'm not, remind me of TIF financing. I'm not.
Tax incremental financing.
Well, I know we don't use it in our world. I'm not so familiar with TIF.
Secondly, Section 8, are your tenants affordable housing? Are they Section 8 tenants, or are they paying rent completely out of their own pockets?
Good question. So I mentioned earlier, most of our properties our tenants pay for, but we do have one property that is 100% Section 8. It's called HAP, Housing Assistance Program. So we call it a HAP contract. So one property is completely Section 8, and a few of our other properties, small percentages of the people who live there are Section 8. But the vast majority of the people who live on our properties actually earn an income and pay their rent.
And so for these Section 8 housing, what do you see in terms of turnover rates? I know there's high crime. potentially dangerous situations for residents? What type of turnover rates do you have? How many years do you see people living there? Thank you.
So on our properties, so far, since we did the rehab, the turnover rate is decreasing quite a bit. You have to understand, what's interesting about our properties, and this is just insight overall, the majority of our tenants in the Section 8 property are women, are single women with children. And most of the crime that's happening, on a side note, is the crime that's happening because of their boyfriends or their male companions who are coming on the property. So they are very aware that if they are kicked out or removed from our property, i.e. Section 8, it's very difficult to get Section 8 again, right? There's a long list of people waiting to get Section 8. So if you lose your Section 8, these people are in trouble. And so they're very aware of that, and they do everything they can, most do everything they can to stay in there and quote-unquote abide by the rules. So the turnover rate has decreased tremendously. It still exists. We have to remove people for drugs, for violence. Even Child Protection Services comes in, and there are issues. But generally speaking, there's very little turnover rate right now.
We may have time for one more. Anthony, let me ask a question about
Sure.
who manages the property for you. Who's on site? Are they your employees? And can you talk a little bit about that process? How actively engaged are they with the tenants? And,
Sure.
what's that like?
So we outsource to a third party all of our property management until we have critical mass in a market, i.e. probably 1,000 plus units. It makes no sense to property manage it ourselves. So we third party outsource that. And so we have very close relationships with our property management companies. These are property management companies that are specific to the affordable industry. They know how to qualify candidates. They know how to do all the financials. Along with the property management company, we have nonprofit partnerships and organizations who are on site, who are providing the services that I mentioned earlier. So we're on the phone. We have weekly meetings, provide financial reports on a weekly basis. We work very closely with them to ensure that the property is maintained, that the qualified candidates are taken care of, and that the services are offered. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir. Anthony Jowid, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.